my channel and welcome to episode 5 of Clear the Cart. I cannot believe that we are already on episode 5. And if you're like, girl, what are you talking about? Let me fill you in, let me catch you up really quick. So I started in June, the very beginning of June, a challenge here on my YouTube channel called my Clear the Cart TBR series. So basically what's going down, and like I said, I didn't start this until June. So I only had half the year, a little over half the year to get this done. I had 60 fiction books on my TBR cart and I was like, okay, we have got to get this number down because my book buying habit was just really outweighing my reading habit, you know what I mean? And so I just needed to get my TBR cart under control, and that is why I decided that I was going to do a Clear the Cart TBR challenge to try to read all 60 books on my TBR cart. It's over there, that's what I'm looking at, by the end of 2024. So that's my Clear the Cart challenge, and today's video is my July wrap up. Happy August, by the way. I cannot believe it. I am one of those girlies who loves fall. I'm not a summer girly. I live in Florida. It is so hot here in the summer. So as soon as August hits, I'm like ready for fall. Even though fall does not really exist where I live, it's more of like a state of mind. You know what I mean? Before I get into talking about all of these books, I want to throw my July stats up on the screen and chat about them for a second. Total number of books that I read in July was 11, same as June. The total pages read in July was 3,560, a little bit less than June. And then the genre breakdown is 5 romance, 1 fantasy, 1 media tie-in, 1 mystery/thriller, 1 sci-fi, 1 horror, and 1 nonfiction. The one thing I am proud of this month, I feel like I had a very diverse reading month for me. I typically read a lot of romance and some fantasy, and I feel like I was all over the map, okay? Like there was a lot of different genres going on, and that also might be why I feel like overall I had an okay reading month. I didn't love a lot of the books that I read, but they're not on my TBR cart anymore. So it's a win, it's a win. Speaking of them not being on my TBR cart anymore, let's take a look at the books that I was supposed to read in July. Here they are. These are the books that I was supposed to finish up throughout the month of July. And here are the books that I actually read in July. So as you can see, I got very close, but Kingdom of Ash kind of got me, okay? I will say I'm a little bit over halfway through Kingdom of Ash. So I did make a big dent in it. I did not include the pages that I've read of Kingdom of Ash in my page count for my monthly page count because I only count the books that I finished. So I actually have read more pages than I said. But anyway, I did go on a trip the last weekend of July with my best friend. We went to Charleston, and so that kind of threw me off a little bit as far as finishing up Kingdom of Ash because it's not really a girls trip kind of book. You know what I mean? I did read on the trip, but Kingdom of Ash just didn't really feel like the vibe. All right, now let's chat. Let's chat about these 11 books. I don't have all 11 of them because I have one on my Kindle, and we will talk about that one first. It's a thriller mystery, and I talked about this in my bookshelf tour video. I don't really tend to buy hard copies of mystery thrillers too often because I don't really like the covers and I don't really want them on my shelves, to be honest. And I don't really read a lot of mystery thrillers because I'm very sensitive to them. So I don't have a hard copy of this book, but it is Darling Girls. I gave this book a 4 stars. Now I read this with my virtual book club. That's what She Read Book Club. That's the only reason I read it, is because this is my book club pick for the month. So I kind of had to read it. I didn't really have a choice. And that's why I also read a book that wasn't on my TBR. You know what I mean? So I gave it a read, and I will say I did enjoy it, but it definitely did not feel like a thriller to me. It felt more like a mystery. But something that I did appreciate about it is I didn't get super spooked. Like I said, I'm very, very sensitive to mysteries and thrillers. Like, I don't know, I just have a very sensitive spirit when it comes to that stuff. And typically I like cannot sleep, I cannot take a shower. Like I just am so scared someone's gonna like jump out at me at every corner when I'm reading a mystery thriller. But this one did not happen to me. A lot of the girls in my book club were saying that it's a psychological thriller. So it was more so like a mind thing. And I could see that because it definitely felt like eerie and disturbing. So there's this lady, her name is Miss Fairchild, and she fosters these girls who, I'm not gonna get into it because I don't want to spoil it, but they don't have the best experience living with Miss Fairchild. A lot of weird, disturbing stuff goes down at the house, and then they end up growing up, they make it out of the foster home. All 3 of these girls are off living their lives as adults, and we're kind of following them as adults. And then they stay in contact, like they have a relationship, all 3 of the girls still, and then they're all brought back to the house. because there is something that went down and the police are wanting them to go back to the house to help answer some questions, uncover some stuff. So it's just a very eerie, dark book. I would definitely check the trigger warnings because there's some child abuse in there, and it was very disturbing, especially as a mom. I was kind of like, okay, so I gave it a 4 stars because I read it in like a day and a half. I sped through it. I was on the edge of my seat, but I was also kind of bored at the same time. Like, I wanted to know what was gonna happen, but it was kind of boring. I can't really explain it. A lot of the girls in my book club got it when I said that. They were like, yes, same. Like, I was invested in the story, but when I finished it, I was kind of let down a little bit. And that's how I felt too. The ending, I think it was supposed to be like a jaw drop ending. And some of the girls in book club, it did give them that reaction. But for some reason to me, I was like, oh, that's the ending. Like, I didn't see it coming, but I didn't have that shock factor either. And that's what I want out of a mystery thriller, is that, and I just didn't get that. So do with that what you will. Like I said, I don't read a lot of mystery thrillers, so I don't really rate them very often, but I had a good time reading it. My best friend, she loves mystery thrillers, and I did say it's worth reading, and I gave it a 4 star because it did. I was very invested. Like, I had to keep turning the pages on my Kindle, and I wanted to know what was gonna happen. So I did have a good reading experience overall, but it's just not my favorite genre. So I don't know if I'll ever give a mystery thriller 5 stars. You know what I mean? So the next book that we're gonna talk about is this one right here, Gilmore Girls, I Do, Don't I? So I read one of these last month. I don't remember the name of it. It had the word summer in it, The Other Side of Summer, I think. Now, these are media tie-in books. This book had a couple of episodes from season 2 kind of meshed together, and I gave it a 3.5 star because I am a huge Gilmore Girls fan. Like, it is my comfort show. But do I think it's necessary to read these books? No. I have 4 of them. There are only 4 in existence. I read one last month, and then I read the second one now. I have to read them because they're on my TBR cart and I'm clearing the cart, you know what I mean? But I don't think they're necessary because there's no new content, and that's what I thought they were going into them. I thought I was gonna get like new stories of Lorelai, Rory, Luke, everyone, but no, it's just like I'm reading an episode of the TV show that I've already seen like 50 times. And so it's not very necessary. And to be honest, the show, like, it just captures the banter between all the characters so well, and it doesn't really come off in this. Like, it's kind of, I just feel like I'm reading a script more so than a story. You can probably, like, they're very short. So I can't give it less than a 3.5 because I love Gilmore Girls, but I don't really think they're necessary to read, if I'm being honest, especially if you've already seen the show. Okay, the next one I want to talk about is Nora Goes Off Script by Annabelle Monaghan, I think is how you say her name. This is my first book that I've ever read by this author, and as soon as I finished it, I immediately went and bought another one, Summer Romance. I can't read it this year because I'm focused on clearing my TBR cart over there, but I did add it to my 2025 TBR, and I'm so excited because I loved this. I give it a 4.25, but the more I think about it, I might bump it up to a 4.5 because I just enjoyed the writing so incredibly much. It felt like I was reading a movie, and I just got very attached to the characters. One thing I will say, there is a major miscommunication trope in here, and there's like kind of this twist type of thing that goes with it. I did not see it coming, but it made me so mad. I was like, nobody fact checked. Like, it was just, it was maddening kind of, and I feel like that kind of took away a little bit. And the other thing that took away from the story for me, I felt like the chemistry between the 2 main characters wasn't really existent, to be honest, and I feel like they went from 0 to 100 really quick. I love a slow burn. I love tension. I love buildup, and this, I feel like, just did not have that. It's about a single mom named Nora, obviously, right? And she is a screenwriter. She writes like cheesy little romance, like think Hallmark movies, right? So she writes these kinds of screenplays, and it ends up, she writes kind of like her life story in one. It gets sold to like a bigger company, and they're actually filming it at her house. And so there's this big movie star guy at her house. They end up talking because he's at her house, and it kind of just goes from there. So that is what this one is about. I feel like I think I'm gonna stick with a 4.25. The more that I'm talking about it, I loved the idea of the story and I loved the writing, but the lack of chemistry between the characters was kind of frustrating to me, to be honest, because I feel like this had so much potential. But like I said, I did buy another one of her books and I'm so excited to read it because I really did enjoy the way that she told a story, if that makes sense. So that is this one. The next book we are going to talk about is probably the wildest book I've ever read in my entire life. It's called Bunny by Mona Awad, I believe is how you say the author's name. Okay, how do I even go about talking about this? I'm not really sure. So I listened to this one with my best friend on our drive home from Charleston. It took the entire drive for us to listen to it. The entire time, the amount of times that we looked at one another and we are just like, what? Honestly, I'm really glad that I read this with somebody else because I feel like if I was reading this by myself, I would have felt like just something was wrong with my brain. So I've heard people talk about this for years. Like this has been on my mental TBR for years. I actually bought this at a bookstore when we were in Charleston. It was such a cute little bookstore. It was like a wine bar and a bookstore combined. So we bought a bottle of wine and we bought some books. This one I was like, okay, I feel like this is a sign. It was the only copy they had. And like I said, it's been on my mental TBR forever. So I was like, I'm just gonna do it. And like I said, we ended up listening to the audiobook on the way back from the trip. I gave it a 2.5. because I can't even tell you what this book is about. Like I wish that I could, but I can't. I have no idea what I read. And people I have heard describe it as a fever dream. Like it feels like you're reading a fever dream. That is true. And I was always just so curious to read it because every review I've ever heard is like, you have to read it to understand what I mean. And I was like, okay, fine. I'll read it to understand what you mean. Did I understand the book? No. Do I understand what people are saying when they say that it feels like you're in a fever dream? Yes. So basically it's about the main character. Her name is Samantha and she goes to, I think it's like an Ivy League school. She is a writing major, I think. Yeah, she is in the graduate fiction writing cohort at New England's elite Warren University. And there is a clique of girls in her cohort. They call themselves the Bunnies. And she ends up getting in with this group. Like the first year that they're in the program together, I guess the Bunnies don't really pay her any mind. They don't really like her. They're not interested in her. And then her senior year of the program, for whatever reason, they become interested in her and they bring her into the Bunnies. And y'all, I really don't even know. I don't even know how to describe what I read. I feel like it's one of those books that you're supposed to be reading between the lines. Like she's saying things without saying them. Listen, this is not me dogging on myself. I am a smart woman. I'm a confident woman. I am proud of what I bring to the table. I'm not that kind of reader. Like, please write on the page what you want me to know because otherwise it is going right over my head. And that is how I felt when I was reading this the entire time. On the last little bit of our drive home, we spent like 15 or 20 minutes on Reddit just reading theories because we were like, what the did we just read? It was a wild time. Truly, I was intrigued enough to read it because I've heard people say that it's the craziest, wildest book they've ever read. Do I regret reading it? No. Would I recommend it? Also no. Okay, the next book that I read is In 5 Years by Rebecca Searles. I don't know. I never know how to say her last name. I have a couple of her books right here. And I think I have come to terms with the fact that this author is just not for me. I gave this one 3 stars and I will say her writing style is very atmospheric, but the actual story, like the plot, always feels kind of clunky to me. And the only way I can describe it is I feel like I get whiplash whenever I am reading her stories. So this one is about a girl named Dani and she is like a hustler, a go-getter, an overachiever. She's like climbing her career ladder. She is engaged to be married, all this stuff, whatever. And then she wakes up from, I think just like a regular nap, if I remember right. This is the first book that I read in July. It feels like I read it 8 months ago, to be honest. And she wakes up and it's 5 years later from when she fell asleep. And she's getting like a glimpse into what her life is like in 5 years. And it's nothing like what she thought it was going to be. And it's nothing like what it was when she went to sleep. Like she doesn't have the same job, not engaged to the same guy. It's just a whole different world. And so what bothered me about this, I felt like Dani was so unlikable, like so unlikable. And what happened at the end, I was so mad. Every book of hers that I've read makes me so mad, and I'm like, maybe she does it on purpose because she wants to like evoke this really strong emotion in people. So she's good at that as an author, I will say, but I just find that her characters aren't very likable, Danny included. I feel like the end of this one was supposed to be this big like full circle feeling moment, but I was just like, what is wrong with your character? Like, what is wrong with you as a human being? Like, it didn't sit well with me. And so I didn't really love it. I wish I could tell you what made me so mad, but it's a major spoiler, so I can't talk about it. But if you read it or you've read it, you probably know what I'm talking about. And I was just like, you are not a girl's girl. Like, that's all I'm gonna say. Next up is Red Rising by Pierce Brown. This is a sci-fi book. I do not read a lot of sci-fi. This is what I'm saying. I read a lot of books this month that are not my typical genres, and I think that's why I had a rough reading month. Like, I felt like a lot of the books that I was reading, I was just really trying to finish them so that I could be done with them and move on to the next one. But I will say my TBR for August, I'm very excited about. There's a lot of books on there that I'm very stoked to read, so I think August is gonna be a better reading month. So if it sounds like I'm complaining about all these books, I'm so sorry, but it just was not a good reading month for me. But this is part of the Clear the Cart TBR challenge. I just have to read the books on my cart, and I will say, doing this challenge has made me a more intentional book buyer. The books that I've been buying for myself to read in 2025, instead of just buying a book after hearing like 2 people talk about it and being like, yeah, I want to read it, because that's how I ended up with most of these books, I'm really vetting the books that I'm purchasing, and I'm making sure that they're books that I honestly think that I'm going to enjoy reading. And so I'm really excited for my 2025 TBR. But anyway, back to talking about Red Rising. I gave it a 3.5 star. I've heard it described as Hunger Games in outer space, and I would say that's a pretty accurate description. It's not exactly the same, but like I definitely got the vibes of what people were saying whenever they describe it as that. So the main character's name is Darrow, I don't know how to say it. And his wife gets killed. That's on the back of the book, so it's not a spoiler. And in this world, I think they live on Mars, right? Their caste system is by color. So he is a red. Red is at the like toward the bottom, and golds are at the top. And so I don't want to spoil anything because there's like hardly anything on the back of the book, but I'll read you the back because it's like 2 sentences. That way I don't give you any spoilers. But it says, his wife taken, his people enslaved, driven by a longing for justice and the memory of lost love, Darrow will stop at nothing to bring down his enemies, even if he must become one of them to do so. So there you go. This is a trilogy. I don't know if I'm going to continue it because I don't know if I care enough. I don't think I'm a sci-fi girl. I really don't. I loved Hunger Games, maybe because the YA aspect. This just felt, it was a little gruesome for me. I don't know, there were just parts that I was like, ooh, this is hurting my belly. Like, this is hurting my stomach. This is making me uncomfy. So I don't know if this is a series that I'm gonna continue because I don't know if it's a genre that is for me. I know that this is a very loved book, a very loved trilogy, but I just don't think that the genre is for me. And that's okay, that's okay. So the next book that I have, gosh, another one that I don't have a lot of good things to say is Last Time We Met by Emily Houghton, I don't know. This one I gave a 3 star. This was a very okay book. Very all right. I read this one when I was in Charleston, and I think what bothered me the most is it felt very flat. The plot felt very blah, the characters felt very blah, like it felt like a 2D story. There were parts at the end that I was like, oh wait, like this is actually getting good. And it would kind of like tug at my heartstrings, and I was like, okay, I'm feeling something amazing. But then it would like move on, and I was like, oh, okay. It's about 2 childhood best friends, Eleanor and Finn, and they end up losing touch and then coming back together, what is it, like 13 years later? Oh, 2 decades later, so 20 years later. It says they haven't spoken in 15 years. And so something tragic happens in Finn's life, so that's why he comes back. They live in London when they're kids, kids. Finn moves to California, I think, and he ends up coming back to London because something tragic happens within his family, and so he ends up reconnecting with Eleanor at a wedding of a mutual friend. And here's the thing, they didn't talk during the 15 years, and they were friends when they were 13. I'm just like, did you really have that strong of a connection? Like, it was just very unbelievable to me. Their connection just did not feel believable, and honestly, the chemistry just wasn't there either, and I was just like, it's just kind of very blah. And I hate saying that about someone's work, but I don't know, you guys. It felt very flat. I don't know how else to describe it. And I know that I'm not the only one that feels this way, because the reason that I read this book in the month of July is because the prompt that I pulled out of my TBR jar is the lowest rated book on Goodreads. It has like, what does it have on Goodreads? Let's look it up. It has a 3.4 on Goodreads. So that's not that bad, but it was just my lowest rated book on my TBR cart. I don't really feel that bad for giving it a 3, and I don't feel like I'm super far off base. Not really loving it. It just felt very unbelievable to me, and I was just like, okay, do these characters actually even care about each other? You know? So that was last time we met. The next book I'm a little bit more excited to talk about, and that is Powerless by Elsie Silver. This is the third book in the Chestnut Springs series, and let me just tell you, this was my favorite one at the beginning. I was obsessed with this book when I started it. I ended up giving it a 4-star. So I loved the first like 60% of the book. I was flying through it. I loved Jasper and Sloane. I loved their connection. Childhood friends to lovers is one of my favorite tropes ever, because it is my real life trope. I started dating my husband when I was 16. I'm 34. We've been married for over 10 years. Like, I love a good childhood friends to lovers trope, okay? So I was into it. I was loving it. I was loving the tension. The tension was so good. But when that tension broke at about 60% through and the spice started coming in, it lost me, okay? And I've said this before, Elsie Silver's spice is just typically not for me. I feel like the word that I would use to describe her spice is crude, and it's not my vibe, okay? So that really took me out of the story, because they're at like the 60% mark, like there was a lot of it, and I was like, oh, okay, like this is what we're doing now. So it just kind of pulled me out of the story a little bit. But what this one is about, it's about Sloane, who is a ballerina, and Jasper is a hockey player for the NHL, and like I said, they're childhood friends, and Jasper is, I think he's not one of the Chestnut Springs brothers. He's a friend of theirs who was kind of like adopted in. And so he is playing hockey, doing his thing, and Sloane is actually engaged. They're best friends. Like, they've been best friends, stayed best friends, like whatever. Sloane gets engaged to an a-hole, basically, because her dad tells her that it's a good business move for him. Which, first of all, I was just like, come again? Anyway, so she's engaged to this guy because her dad thinks it's a good business move for him, and she's like at the wedding, like at her wedding, about to get married, and then she calls up Jasper and she's like, you gotta get me out of here, I cannot do this. And so he gets her out of there. She runaway bride situation. Is this a spoiler? Okay, I was just checking to make sure that's not a spoiler. It says it on the back of the book. So she's this runaway bride, and her and Jasper end up going on this trip together, and things happen, okay? So that is this one, and like I said, I really loved the first like 60%, but then the tension broke, and I was just like, okay, I don't mind spice in books, but Elsie Silver's way of writing spice, it's just not for me. So to me, when the spice started, it felt like their deep emotional connection that we were getting just kind of went away, and everything became purely physical, which that's not my vibe, okay? So that is how I feel about this one. Loved the first 60%. Like, I thought it was gonna be a 5-star read, like as I was going, and then that happened, and I was like, oh, okay, never mind. So I took a whole star off. One thing I'll say, I loved his nickname for her. He calls her Sunny, and I just thought that was the cutest thing that I've ever heard in my life. So I loved most of this one, but I had a few like, ooh, not for me moments. But overall, I think this is my favorite one so far out of the 3 books that I've read in the Chestnut Springs series, because I feel like their emotional connection at the beginning was so strong and I really loved it. Next up is the fantasy book that I read for the month of July. This one is Reckless by Lauren Roberts. I gave it a 3.75. This is book 2. It comes after Powerless. I read Powerless last year, and I've heard a lot of people say something about this book that I didn't want to be true, but it's true. There's no plot. There's no plot until the very, very end. Peyton and Kai, they are the main characters, okay? It just feels like they are just on their own little adventure that doesn't tie to the overall plot of the story. So it's a fantasy trilogy, right? So there's like an overarching story that's going on, and I didn't feel like we were getting any of that until the end. I enjoyed it at the beginning. Like, I just liked being back in the world. Now, here's the thing. I liked Powerless, but I'm not like a mega fan like a lot of people are. So I didn't really have high expectations going into this. So I had a really good time. The first maybe like 15%, I was like, oh, this is fun to be back with Peyton and Kai. They have amazing banter. And so I was like, oh, I miss them. Like, I'm glad to be back with them. But then it started dragging on and nothing was happening. I don't know, the plot was not plotting, okay? But then the end, something wild happened, and this is one of the first times ever that I guessed the ending. And when I read it and I was right, I was just like, let's go, I need book 3 immediately. So the beginning, so much fun. The middle, kind of dragged. The end, incredible. And I'm ready for book 3 and I'm excited about book 3. But I've heard people say that the author said that this is kind of a filler book to get to book 3, like a bridge. And I don't know, that seems kind of crazy to me in a trilogy, because I feel like there was a novella already. So there was Powerless, Powerful, which is the novella, this one, and then the last one comes out, I think next year, I don't know. And I don't know, I was just like, I feel like this didn't need to be a filler. Like, could we have had more plot, please? So, and like I said, I've heard a lot of other people say that, and unfortunately I agree with them. So I know that I'm not way off base feeling that way. And if you've never heard of this series, I can't really tell you that much about this one because it's book 2 in the series and I don't want to spoil anything. But book 1, Powerless, it's about Peyton, who is an ordinary, and Kai, who is an elite. He's the enforcer, and they live in this society. So his dad is king, and this king, he wants to get rid of all ordinaries because he thinks that it's kind of making the elites weaker, bringing them down, getting them sick, whatever. And so it's Kai's job to go and execute the ordinaries. So that's all I'm gonna say, because I don't know what is on the back of the book and I don't want to spoil anything. In Powerless, it kind of gave me Hunger Games vibes in the sense that like there were trials and Peyton ends up getting into the trials even though she doesn't have powers, and it's this whole thing. So the first one was a good time. I think I gave it like 3.5 stars or 3.75 stars. Same thing with this one, like it was a good time, but like also the middle, I was like, what are we doing here? But the end, I was gonna give it like 3 stars, but then the end, I got so excited about it. I think because it's the first time I've ever guessed like an ending of a book, because I'm just not good at doing that. And so, like I said, didn't have the best time in the middle, but the end got me so excited for the 3rd book. So that is Reckless. We have 2 more books to talk about here. Okay, next up is The Romcomers by Catherine Center. I had such a good time reading this one. I gave it a 4.5 stars. And I think the only 2 things that kept me from giving it a 5-star, the first one, there were some parts in here where the 4th wall was broken. Like the author was talking to us as the reader, and it was a little jarring to me a little bit. Like it kind of took me out of the story and I was like, wait, what? So I didn't love that. I haven't seen that done in many romance books. So I was just like, ooh, I don't know if I like that. And then also, this is a pattern this month. I feel like the chemistry between the 2 characters was just not as strong as I wanted it to be. So Emma is our female main character. I loved her. I found myself rooting for her the entire time. She is just a character who is unapologetically herself, and she's like kind of quirky and just like she is who she is, and I really, really love that. But anyway, she is an aspiring screenwriter. She wants to write rom-coms, and Charlie Yates is a very well-known screenwriter, like super top of his industry. He's won tons of awards, very famous. And so Emma ends up getting hired to help Charlie rewrite a romance movie that he wrote because apparently it is terrible, awful, very bad. So someone Emma knows actually works with Charlie, and this mutual person that they know hires Emma to help Charlie without Charlie knowing. And so at first Charlie's like, no, absolutely not, don't want to do it. Then he ends up giving in. Emma moves to, I think, LA, where Charlie lives, moves into his house because he's like, the only way that I'm going to write with someone is if they live with me and we get this done. But the thing is, Emma lives with her dad as his full-time caretaker. So she has to leave her dad, her sister steps in, takes over. And my favorite part of this book was her dad. Her dad is an angel on earth. Like, he is the sweetest man that I have ever read about. Like, I just wanted to give him a hug. I was like, wow, you are so pure, so wholesome. And honestly, he was just my favorite part of this whole book. So I read this one at the very beginning. I think this was the second book that I read in July, so quite a while ago. But I just remember feeling so happy, so giddy. I laughed out loud. Like, it was a good time. I just wish that the fourth wall wasn't broken, and I wish that the characters just had a little bit more chemistry. So that is The Rom-Comers by Catherine Center. And then the last book that we're gonna talk about is actually a nonfiction book. I asked you guys in my last wrap up if you wanted me to start talking about the nonfiction books that I read every month. I usually only read one, sometimes two a month. Mostly only one now that I'm trying to clear my fiction TBR cart. So most of you guys said yes, that you would love to hear me chat about my nonfiction reads. So I have a productivity membership where I coach women in creating their version of a peacefully productive life. That's what I do for my day job. And we have such a beautiful community over there of over 450 women. And this is one of the books that we read together for this quarter. And it's called Create a Life You Love by Stephanie Mae Wilson. I don't give nonfiction books star ratings. I just kind of say like, yeah, I liked it, or no, I didn't, and yeah, I liked it. I did enjoy this one. The little blurb is how to quiet outside voices so you can finally hear your own. So many women in the Hustle Sanely BFF membership loved this book. I did too. I liked it a lot. I don't know if I loved it, but I liked it a lot. For me, when it comes to nonfiction books, I feel like you have to be, like, it has to be right time, right place in order for it to really hit. And I don't really feel like I needed this content in my life right now. Like, I'm super happy with the life that I've built and the direction that I'm heading, but I still really enjoyed the book because I feel like the way that the author writes, she's very conversational, and it felt like I was sitting across from her, like sipping on a cup of coffee. So I really enjoyed that, and I really liked the way that she was basically like, you get to decide how your life is gonna be. Because I think so often we get caught up in thinking that life has to look one certain way, or we're just like, okay, we have to go to college, then we get married, then we buy a house, then we have kids, like, and it has to go in this order. And she's just kind of like, you can actually do like whatever you want. Like, you get to decide how your life is going to look. And so she just kind of walks you through what that means and what that looks like. I want to read one part that I really liked. It says, one last reminder before we move on. You're not looking for the perfect answer here. There is no perfect answer. All you're looking to do is find your next step, the next step you want to take toward the life you want to live. And remember, if you get a ways down your chosen path and realize it isn't the path you want to be on, you can always make a new decision. And that doesn't mean you'll lose all the progress you've made either. You'll be able to keep all the growth, development, skills, and wisdom you've gained along the way, and you'll get to apply them in a new way on a new path. So I did enjoy this book. Like I said, I don't really feel like it was super applicable to the season of life that I'm in right now, but if you're in a season where you're just not happy with the life path that you're on right now, I would recommend this one. All right, y'all, so those are the 11 books that I read in the month of July. Did not complete my July TBR, but I'm gonna make up for it in August, okay? I'm gonna finish Kingdom of Ash, and I'm gonna try to read all the rest of those books on my August TBR so that we don't get behind in my Clear the Cart challenge. So before we wrap this up, I want to show you an overview of where we're at with the Clear the Cart challenge. So this is what it is looking like so far. So I still have August, September, October, November, December. I still have 5 months to clear the TBR cart, to check off all these books, get them all done. I'm confident. Even though I didn't finish my TBR this month, I still think that I can do it. I'm excited about my August TBR. I think that I'm gonna have a better reading month in August than I did in July, just because I'm looking forward to more of the books that are on my TBR. So thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure that you subscribe if you want to follow along on my Clear the Cart journey and see if I can read all 60 books on my TBR cart by the end of the year. I love you so much. I appreciate you watching, and I hope you have the best day ever.